Well, welcome to the show today. Today we have Tyler Reagin. Tyler Reagin is someone who I have actually been around. I've been part of the Catalyst community for over a decade, and he was the former president of Catalyst and author of multiple books. And the book we're going to be talking about today is called Leading Things You Didn't Start, Winning Big When You Inherit People, Places, and Possibilities. This is a much needed book and a much needed conversation for leaders, entrepreneurs, and stepdads. So if you are any of those things, lean in to this conversation. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I think it's the first time I've heard somebody say author of multiple books. That was kind of like a, whoa, wait, what? Who are you talking about?
I've got both of them, man. I've got both
That's
of them.
weird.
So
it's weird.
Yeah, it's cool though. So, we're going to talk about your book. And one of the things in your book that I think is really the most pressing thing that you talk about, and I just really want to intro this show with, is this topic, your odd fascination with the roller skating. Could we talk about that for a little while?
I don't think it's odd. So that's why I'm thrown off. Like, people think it's odd.
No, I love it. I love how you talked about that and really use that, the party, roller skating party, to talk about how to set up the space and environment, atmosphere.
I mean, were you a roller skater or not?
I was a roller skater. I was kind of like a straight line crash into the wall. Line crash into the wall. I was that
fast
guy.
As you can go. I grew up, my parents literally, we'd go on Fridays and Saturdays. My parents met at a skating rink when they were growing up. Oh. My dad actually had like a trophy or two, hilarious, but like I didn't know that was a thing. But yeah, I just grew up with my brother, my friends. We were there every weekend. And I just love it. It's, it's not even, well, it is the act of skating, but it's just all of the environment that I remember so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I thought it was a great way of illustrating that. But, I do want to say that your roller skating playlist, Cameo, Word Up. I mean, come on.
Are you serious?
You didn't even put the hokey pokey on there. Like that is the standard.
Because that's not but it's not like you don't get going. Like I'm not going to listen to the hokey pokey in the car.
Oh, that's true.
No, there's no way I'm doing that. But like Word Up has the right, see, that's the key though. See, that clearly tells me you didn't skate a whole lot because you have to know the beats that you're looking for that make sense for rhythm and skating.
I totally don't. I mean, I was fast as I can, didn't know how to brake, slammed into the wall. I was that guy. So
all right. Yeah. You clearly weren't paying attention to the music then.
Hide the men, women, and children. And I'm going to be sore for the next 2 days.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. No, that was great and great fun. And good recommendation, I guess, for that playlist for anyone who is a roller skater out there. I'm sure they exist somewhere out there.
Oh my goodness, you're killing me right now, Chad.
Sorry. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I mean, I just have to call it for what it is, man. So in the book, you talk about just, of course, leading things that you didn't start. And of course, I know this because I was a part of Catalyst, just a participant of Catalyst when Brad Lomenick ran Catalyst, and then when you took it over. So I've actually seen your leadership unfold as far as from a participant standpoint, just being part of the community. So I just want to applaud you. And now I know that you've rolled out of that role and responsibility, but I just want to applaud you. And it was great. Catalyst was great. It was great under Brad's leadership, great under your leadership.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it was, it's really interesting when you step in, a lot of us step into space, right? But when you step into a national kind of public space, it's the tension tends to be a little higher because everybody has a thought about it. Everybody has an opinion. Anybody that had been a part of Catalyst had a Catalyst story, So, but I think a lot of leaders are stepping in and carrying the weights of those. Well, gosh, these people love it. What are they going to think how I lead? These people don't like it. Maybe I can get them back. Like you're kind of wrestling with all that. And that's honestly, Chad, where the book came from was I realized like there's just not a lot of resources out there on this kind of thing. There's especially in the faith-based space, there are, a couple books on passing the baton or something like that. I just felt like there's a million books on on startup and entrepreneurship and some of that stuff. But most of us don't do that. Most of us step into a space that already exists. And so for me, I was going, gosh, well, maybe we need to write that resource. Maybe there's a thing that needs to be out there. And I still laugh a little bit because, and if you've read both my books, you know how kind of simple I like to keep things. I feel like a lot of leadership people try to complicate it to sound important or sound really intellectual. I am clearly neither one of those things. And so my heartbeat is, I want you to feel like we're just sitting at a coffee shop talking about it. And one of the reviews I got recently on Amazon was a 2-star review that said it was too simple. And I thought, well, then you didn't read the first chapter. And it could be. I mean, honestly, it could be. That's all right. It's fine with me. I would rather err on that side of just simplifying the idea instead of just trying to overcomplicate something that you got to think through 17 versions of to make sure you're doing it well. So anyway, that's kind of where it came from. And I'm, thank you for saying that, because you just never know. Like, part of it is you're just trying, and I care about Brad, and I care about John Maxwell and Andy and all these people that I'm stewarding their names and their space and their time. And so, and I care about leaders like you who are giving money, and it's stewarding your resources and your time. So it was a pretty interesting season for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I was actually talking to a coworker today and just kind of explaining, I've been a pastor now for 10 years myself. So just talking about that transition. And I just said, there are 3 books right now that I would recommend that somebody who's maybe in pastoral ministry, transitioning wherever it is within the realm of ministry that you're going. I said, there are 3 books that I would recommend. And the first one is yours, because it's the leadership perspective, kind of overarching, looking at different things, avoiding a lot of mistakes that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And then another book called The First 90 Days, written by the Harvard Business Review, kind of heady. It's a heady book. And then there's another book, I believe it's called Moving On, Moving Forward. And again, talking about that ministry transition of what to look for. And each of them is different. Yours is easier to grasp. The Harvard Business Review, as you can imagine, a little bit more technical, harder to grasp. Moving On, Moving Forward is more of like a pastoral kind of like
interesting
pastor talking to a pastor, walking through that process. Yeah. And so I think that your book is invaluable in that. And you talk about this 2-faceted challenge that a leader has when they step into this space. And man, I felt it. It's, what do you do when you take over something, and how do you as a leader set up your team and organization for future transitions? And the second part of that is something that I think is just a recent conversation that people within the faith-based space are having, of what does that look like, passing the baton off to the next generation? Because, the spiritual giants of whatever era that you want to talk about, they in the past really hadn't talked about succession very well, I think, in my opinion. And so it's kind of like that leader just kind of like coast, runs out of energy, and then somebody else has to pick up the pieces and take off. But your book is a way for that leader, while you're still, to use a flying analogy, because that was my world for a while, just kind of taking that and saying, no, we're just going to continue flight instead of putting it on the ground and then taking the organization down. I loved your 2-faceted challenge that you talk about there, of what do you do when you take over something, especially that was the first part. Yeah. And so what did you do? Like, what are some early things that you did within Catalyst to, and I know you also worked at North Point for years.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you did that helped you?
Yeah. Man, there's a lot of things that come to mind. A couple of the key things for me was, I'm just, and I think that is why I simplify everything, because to me, the simple leadership is quite simple when you realize it's about people.
Right.
Like, that's why I just, like, we can come up with a million different principles, but what I'm going to do is continue to drive you back to the idea that if you can't get people on board, if you can't lead them, then what are we doing? Like that, what's the point of that? And so for me, I knew that there was now a team who I'd been a part of now for a year, just as a creative director, who was being handed a new boss. Like, when they all accepted their jobs, I was not in that picture. I wasn't anywhere near that picture. And by the way, they were also, Catalyst was in some of its best times. Brad had led it there. A lot of them, they were close with Brad. They traveled with Brad. They'd done a ton. They were family, And so now this guy comes in who's been a part of the family, but like not in this role. I knew that I had a couple really important keys that I had to do. One was, I've got to honor Brad. Like, I'm going to honor where we've come from. I'm going to honor Jeff Schinnebarger, and I'm going to honor Tripp and Tyler, who had been hosting for a long time. And I'm going to try to honor the musicians who had helped make us what we are, and Andy and Craig and Christine Kane and all these leaders who had been a part, and John Maxwell, who wasn't working with us at the time, but it was his thing. Like, he and Andy started it together. But Brad specifically, I wanted to make sure that every public opportunity I had to honor Brad, public on stage, but public in the office, I was going to do that. Now, and I made it very clear to the team early on, I talk about this in the book a little bit, that when I talk about where we're going, this is not an indictment of where we've been. Like, this is not me saying, well, gosh, I don't like Brad. No, I'm saying I feel my leadership, my vision, whatever I feel like God's speaking to me is directing us this way. And there are some things that we got to course correct, in my opinion. There are some focuses that we need to bring back into focus. But I'm not saying those as an indictment of my friend. Like, we're just different leaders. And so I would just say that stuff very publicly, because I think leaders get in trouble when they assume nobody wants to hear that, or they assume everybody believes that. And I just go, just say it. That's what emotional intelligence is all about. It's not like I'm going to make every decision that's not going to hurt somebody emotionally. But emotional intelligence says, I recognize that this decision is going to hurt you emotionally. And I'm going to say that out loud so that you as a leader can or know that I understand, and yet I still have to make this call, which means I really feel convicted in this decision because I understand how this is going to hurt you emotionally, right? Or whatever that looks like. So I knew that I just had to honor Brad, and I wanted to do that. And truthfully, I did it for a long time, probably longer than I had to. Brad's very much like, sure, go ahead. You know, like he's moving on. Like, he was fine.
Oh yeah.
But it meant something to me to do that. And I would always honor or err on the side of honoring too long, probably, Chad. Like honestly, I probably did, but it was okay. I'd rather err on that side. The thing I didn't let the honor part do was trap me in the past. Like, I just wanted to say thank you to him. I remember one of my first Catalyst events, when I was just producing the event as a contractor, Craig Rochelle did this talk about standing on the shoulders of the people who came before him, and them actually putting him on their shoulders. And then he knelt down on the stage and just looked at all these leaders and said, so come get on my shoulders, you know? And I just feel that way. Like, I felt like I was standing on the shoulders of some incredible people, and I wanted to make sure they knew that I was thankful for that. The second big piece, though, is now I've got a team who I didn't recruit, who didn't sign up for me, who loved where we had been. And now they're looking at me for direction and guidance and leadership. And in their mind, they're still going, is he the right guy? We like him, maybe, you know, like whatever, all the emotions and thoughts you're having as a leader who just got a new leader. And I just felt like it was time I took about 3 months of just listening, of just kind of status quo, just doing the job. And then I remember coming in, it was the first meeting of the new year. And I had been praying through what my expectations were to be a part of this team. And so I sat them all in a circle, and and there were 6 expectations. I remember it, you know, very clearly. And none of them were about competency. None of them were about execution. They were all about how we're going to treat people. You know, one of them was, if you don't have a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, that's a problem. Because we're leading spiritual leaders, and we cannot be the kind of leaders that do not have that relationship. Like, it is not enough for you to be good at your job. You have to be in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and part of a local church. Like, that's who we serve. So I just created these expectations, and then I made the team. I didn't force them. I just said, now I want you to take a second, and I want you to look eyeball to eyeball with everybody in this circle. And if you continue to sit in this circle, if you choose to be a part of this circle, that you're telling everybody you're looking in their eyes right now that I agree to this standard of behavior, that I agree to this expectation. And because my big thing is, of course, the boss is going to hold you accountable to culture, but what if your team holds you accountable to culture? Like, how much more powerful is that? Like, when your peer comes up and goes, hey man, the way you just talked to that person is not what we agreed upon to be a part of this team. The way you did that business decision, none of us said no, that's not what we do. Man, that would wake me up. Are you kidding? Again, I'm used to the boss saying that, but I'm not used to a peer saying, hey, so I just wanted it to go, here's the expectations, and now leave it in their hands a little bit and go, so pray through this, pray through the fact that I'm never going to be Brad, and pray through the fact that these are the standards that we are going to hold you accountable to. And if God said, if you don't feel like that you can do either one of those things, that's okay. Then it's been a great season. We're thankful, and let's let you go flourish somewhere else, because I don't want you rubbing against that all the time. And so we did. We had a couple that moved on, and they've gone on to things that were better for them in that season. And God allowed us to bring in some other folks. So anyway, that's a long answer to just tell you, like, that's kind of where I started, which was I'm going to honor the past without being trapped by the past, but I'm also going to get the team on board with what it means to be a part of this team. But I didn't do it day one. Like, it did not feel like the right thing to do. I was very patient in that.
Yeah, you talk about honoring, and you spend some time just really kind of drawing out some principles, and you give 5 different principles about honoring. And some of those you've kind of touched on. You celebrate appropriately, you honor the right things, while shifting focus, casting new compelling vision, and then moving on from honoring. And I thought these were really helpful, kind of like handholds as far as honoring, because, and even you even talked about the tension of, if you honor too long, then you don't look like a leader.
You're right.
What are you doing? Just look like you're just there. And it's like, hey, awesome. We're all riding the coattails of the last guy, this being Brad. And I'm not saying this tongue in cheek. I'm just because that was your leadership journey that we're talking about. So it's kind of like you have to have the opportunity to share the vision for your work to go forward, while at the same time not living on the success of the past. And I think that there's a lot of tension there. And I think that even as leaders, you talk about going in with your team where you just establish kind of ground rules saying, hey, you need to be a growing follower of Jesus. These are some baseline expectations. And isn't it sad that we have to go through in a Christian organization where we have to make these things kind of foundational? Isn't that, I mean, I realize how needed it is, but isn't it kind of sad as well?
It is a little bit, but you got to put yourself in a lot of these leaders' shoes. A lot of them are young, a lot of them are different, but like, there's a lot of people that when they join the staff of a church or a ministry, their assumption is that they are going to be grown up spiritually by the staff. Like, that's part of being on staff, which you and I would both agree. We hope that's the case, right? Mm-hmm. But my point to them was, it is called a personal relationship with Jesus because it is personal. Right. And so I cannot grow your personal relationship with Jesus. I can devote you, and I can challenge you, and I can share what God's doing in my life, and I can push you, and I can coach you, but you have to do it. Like, that's my point, but you're right. And I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, gosh, well, I'm leaving because they're just not developing me spiritually? Yeah. Okay. Like, what is everybody doing right now that hasn't been able to go to church physically in a year? Mm-hmm. And yes, you're watching online, but what are you personally doing? I mean, you can get mad at the church you go to all you want, but like, this is a personal relationship. Like, you have the tools to grow in that relationship. I know you like to be handheld and told this is what you need to do to be better, but what if as a leader, you lead and so I do think it's sad in certain situations. I think it's more of just a re-understanding that, like, I know you have an expectation on us to do certain things, but we're also telling you the expectation falls right back on you, because this is your, it is like, I've had leaders before in the past say, well, nobody's developing me. I'm like, remember that time that we as a group read a leadership book that you never would read on time and that you would never participate in the conversation? And do you remember that? Because that's exactly what we were trying to do, but you didn't want to take the ownership or responsibility. You just want us to make you better without any effort. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. You got to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, even in what I see in these 2 words that I'm going to introduce are not my words. I believe they were from a book called Building a Leadership or Building a Discipleship Culture. But it's the idea of invitation and challenge. Yeah. And with Jesus, when he took his disciples, which his disciples turned out to be pretty good leaders, right? 11 of them turned pretty good leaders. He was inviting them into something, but also there was an accompanying challenge to become something. So it was doing something and becoming something. And it wasn't just this, invitation, oh, just come follow me and everything's going to take care of itself. And
Yeah.
in an organization, it's a similar thing. There's growth that needs to happen. When you go in, you take a new business, new organization, new church or whatever. It not only is it the organization that and leadership within it that needs to change, but also the leader.
Yeah.
But it comes with it, this expectation that you're not replacing the previous leader, you're filling a position.
That's right.
Talk about that for a little bit. And then what's the difference?
I'm really passionate about that because I think that's where we all cut ourselves short or leave ourselves short because, let's say that Suzanne was the leader you're replacing and she was incredible and everybody loved her. Well, as a boss, I'm going, I need another Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's one Suzanne that you've worked with. Like there's one. And so you're setting your next employee up for failure if you're trying to replace Suzanne. Now, it's easier, it's better, I'd say, to articulate, well, here's what I loved about working with Suzanne. She was kind. She got things done on time in a timely manner and with excellence. Okay, now you've given me some direction to what the expectations are for the role and what I'm looking for in a candidate, but they're not going to be Suzanne. Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest challenges when leaders step in, you hear that thunder? We had a little storm coming in. Sorry about that. One of the biggest challenges for leaders when you step in to lead something you didn't start is trying to do what the leader before you did, mm-hmm. whether they were good or bad. Like there's some things that you're going, well, they were really good at this. I just interviewed Paul Doherty, who took over big church in Tulsa, Oklahoma for his dad, who passed away from cancer. Judah Smith said similar things. Chris Durso, like there's this thing. This is my dad and mom. They started this place, and now I'm stepping in. Well, the temptation to be them, wow, that's really, really difficult. So in the same thing, when you're replacing a position, we want our people to succeed. And so if we're giving them an unrealistic expectation, it's just a no-win situation. Excuse me. What I like to do, Chad, is go, what was the best parts of this position and how they did it? But also I look and go, is that the same position? Do we need that same exact position that we had when we needed it 4 years ago? Mm-hmm. That's enough. I mean, it is the best time to just kind of do a quick survey and go, now, if I were to hire this from scratch, would I do it the way we've always done it? I've got a church I'm working with even next week who, it's a friend of mine. And he was like, yeah, I've got to rehire this position. This guy just left. And I went, let's pause for a second. Is that the best position? Is that the best way to hire it? Or is you just doing it because that's the way you've always done it? And it was really clear, it just took him a minute. And he was like, no, we need to talk about this. And I was like, we do. So I'm going to spend the day with his team kind of doing an audit of, is this really the best thing? What else is missing? Is there a way to use this for some other stuff that we've been trying to fill the gaps with? In a time like this, where a lot of people, the financial landscape is tricky, sometimes a loss of a position, even just getting rid of it completely, is that realistic? You know what I mean? So, I just think there's a lot of really positive things when a season wraps up for somebody. But the worst thing you can do is try to replace and fix that with the person. I just go, no, what do I want for this position? And I just think you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and the person you're bringing on. Yeah, I think that's really good. And, from a church perspective, I'm sure it's true in businesses too, but in a church perspective, if you're a guy that's out there and if you've been a part of a church to where there was a transition of leadership, the pastor left, and yet you brought in another guy and he didn't last very long, and another guy and he didn't last very long, and then finally the third guy stuck. What one could assume is they actually were just looking for that prototype of the person who left instead of what you're talking about, Tyler. Yeah. Because in that type of organization, it doesn't matter how good of a leader you are. If somebody's perception is, no, we're trying to replace Suzanne. Yep. Then all of a sudden it's like no one's ever going to be Suzanne. And until the church or the organization realizes what you're talking about. Right. We're not trying to produce another Suzanne. Right.
they're setting themselves up for failure.
Totally. And they've been chasing Suzanne now for 3 candidates.
Yep. And then they finally, oh man, you know what? We shouldn't have been looking for that the whole time.
Right.
And then the wheels have gone off that, whatever that
Yep.
division
That
is, or
space,
that
or
ministry. Just really, really hard stuff. So what is, I'll just ask you this question. What is the number one thing that a leader should do to keep himself or herself on track to make sure that they will benefit the whole organization? What's one thing that they can do? Now kind of stepping back and just really getting personal and talking about the leader themselves. What is something that they can do to better the whole organization?
Well, it's funny because we keep talking about simple, and I start the whole book talking about maybe one of the simplest principles in scripture that has lasted for 2,000 years, and yet we keep adding to it. And for me, it's just a North Star. And that is, am I exhibiting, am I showing, am I developing fruit of the Spirit? Like, I mean, again, and most business leaders go, really? I'm like, think about it. If you had a new employee starting with your existing team and they walk in and they are gentle in the way they approach things, they bring joy to the situations, they are loving to the people around them, they are patient and kind, they show self-control. I mean, even if it's 2 out of the 9 or if it's 4 out of the 9, I'm thinking these people are doing a good job. Like, I remember this. I had a new candidate, and the millennial generation gets a bad rap. Some of it's warranted for being entitled and some of this other stuff. This one candidate came in, and from the moment we started talking, she was asking questions about how she could help serve us. How could I want to be better at learning these? Like, it was all questions about learning and getting better, and not, what are you doing for me? And what do and how are you going to make me, like, all these things, it was just a different feeling. And so I felt like she came in showing some self-control, some fruit of the Spirit that made me perk up a little bit and go, and it wasn't complicated, chat. I mean, it was straight up just normal self-awareness and emotional intelligence, which I think is also, a researcher's way of saying the fruit of the Spirit in some ways, So I really just go, if you could keep your hand or your pulse on how you're doing fruit of the Spirit wise, I just think that's a great North Star to start with.
Yeah. I mean, how could you disagree with the things you talked about? Love, joy, peace, patience. I don't know. They're just too good. They're just too kind.
Yeah.
No, they just have a way of not getting caught up in drama because they have self-control. I'm pretty sure that if and somebody in HR would hire like 3 or 4 of those people, they're going to get a raise. Because they're producing well.
Yeah.
Knowing what they're looking for is the best way for them. One of the things that I have sensed in leadership is the tendency to be impatient, and that being one of the fruit of the Spirit. So kind of piggybacking on that, but that is really difficult. And I just say this for me, maybe it's not difficult for everybody. Maybe it's just me, but
it's difficult for everybody. Let's just be clear about it.
Just fresh vision. You're fired up. God's already shown you, hey, this is some new initiatives. Maybe you've already done the demographic study. You've already looked at the space you're walking into. You go in with ideas, or else you're probably not a leader anyway. Right. You're probably more of a manager than a leader. Right. So, if I could parse out the differences between those two, and it's like the tendency that I have is to be way, way, way impatient. What is the value in waiting? Please tell me that. I'm not in the middle of a transition right now, but I might be sometime.
Well, and I think there's a value in that in general. First of all, I'm cracking up because there's hail falling down at my house right now. I'm glad you don't hear it, because I'm like, whoa, hopefully it doesn't take out our house, but we'll see what happens. So far, the Wi-Fi is still rolling, so that's great. You read the book. I have 3 chapters on patience, and it's just not a natural thing. I don't know of anybody that goes, I love being patient. Like, I just don't. I've never met that person. If you were to, and I talk about that marshmallow test that they did in the 60s, where the psychologist would bring a kid in and they would put a marshmallow on the table and say, hey, if you wait until I get back to eat this marshmallow, you get 2. But our minds play tricks on us, and they say, well, yeah, but one's better than zero. So why would I wait for two? I do that all the time, don't I? Like, I mean, you probably do it too. Like, but we sometimes we disconnect our leadership journey from our normal life. So like, oh, that my leadership journey is at work. Well, no, not really. Like, decisions you're making at home can absolutely impact your vocation. Like, you and I both know personally pastors that have lost their ministry because of personal decisions, not quote unquote leadership decisions, that have completely ruined their chance to have ministry for now. And even to the ultimate decision where they took their lives or something, you know, that's so bad because they made such poor life decisions. Well, patience can be one of those pieces. And that's why I think the fruit of the Spirit is such a piece to hang on to. As believers, if you're not connected to the source, you just won't be able to have those things. Like, it matters. Here's the thing. I call it a little bit. I actually, funny, I started talking about this more after I wrote the book, but I wish I put it in there. But there's this idea of, I call it the dance of discernment, because it really is a dance of how long do I honor, you know, we talked about that earlier, before moving on. How long do I keep that person around to see if they can get on board? How long before, you know, and was it in the Psalms that David says it all the time? How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? Like, it's just a human desire. Like, how long do I have to wait? And then I at Christmas a few years ago, I hear this song from Hillsong, and it's called Seasons. And it's a Christmas tune. And there's this, and it's, I just start crying. I mean, the song is just gorgeous about the seeds planted. They don't grow immediately. Like, they take time. But then there's a line in the bridge that just says, if you're not done working, God, I'm not done waiting.
Wow.
And there was something so powerful in my mind, in my heart. It just came, my spirit just leapt inside of me going, that's worth the wait. Like, I've been through enough life when I tried to jump ahead of what God was doing and it didn't work out so well. If my patience is required to see God fully do what he wants to do, then I'm going to go deep, 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 deep down in my soul and try to be as patient with God's grace and the connection and prayer and discernment as I possibly know how. And now, I don't want everybody to hear like, you got an employee that's stealing money from the company and I just need to be super, well, they've done it 4 times. When is, you know,
yeah,
it's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking
Absolutely.
about understanding there is a patience required when you step into something. There's a patience required with that team member who loved the last boss and is trying to get on board with your leadership, but they just still are dealing with the fact that they love their last boss and you're not that person. Well, grace and patience will serve you well as a leader as you step into that. When you show grace and patience to people and they go, oh, they actually care about me more than what I do for them. And I just think it's one of the most critical pieces of this whole conversation.
And I think in the middle of the patience piece, you know, it's really, really tempting to be impatient, especially for a leader, just really as a human being. This human being, because we all have a sense in the way that we think things are going to go. And if it doesn't work out in our timetable, you know, we kind of like beat our head against a wall at times. One of the things that I've found, this isn't in your book, but you know, when you add this to your next book, just, you know, at Chad Zook on this one.
We're not talking about next books right now. Good gracious.
No, but
I did find out, by the way, today, Chad, that a publisher in Brazil is gonna release Leading Things You Didn't Start in Portuguese. That's exciting.
Man, that's awesome. Congrats.
I know. So for all you Brazilians out there listening up, or, you know, folks living in Portugal, it's coming your way. Here we go.
How awesome is that, man? Congrats. You know,
so for the next book, what do you want me to write about?
Well, the thing is, when you talk about patience, while you wait, I think there are 2 key principles to help every person while they're waiting on whatever it is. One is gratitude and the other one is thankfulness. It's just while you're waiting, just, you know, gratitude is the attitude and thankfulness is the expression.
It's good.
You know, it's just while you're waiting, because the tendency is for us to, I think, to get embittered thinking that our way was the right way. And obviously somebody pulled the rug out from under us and now we have to wait. And as leaders going into now, using this in the context of the book, as we go into a new situation, new business, new organization, new ministry, you go in with a bunch of ideas, but yet the tendency is to think that they expect you to fix it right now.
Sure.
And they never expect you to fix everything right now. And the people who do probably aren't going to like you for the leader that you are in 2 years.
Right.
They're probably going to be somewhere else anyway. Just from my 15 years of ministry and leadership experience, I just kind of base that upon. But what are your thoughts with that, Tyler?
Yeah. And let's just add, I mean, most of your listeners are men. Like, we have this thing in us too, right? That we want to show that we know what we're doing, and we want to show that we're capable of what we just got hired to do. And we want to show that we can make hard decisions and we can do those kind of things. My challenge to you would be, is it more important right now to show somebody who probably doesn't weigh into the scope of things, who's so far removed from day to day, that you're a strong, tough leader that can cut somebody at the blink of an eye? Are you Iron, what do they call him? Jack Welch, Iron Jack, whatever it was. Is it Iron Jack? Anyway, I don't think that's right, but you know what I'm saying? Jack Welch would cut the bottom 10% to just show, like, you ain't cutting it. I just don't lead like that. I don't know that I believe in that kind of leadership. I really believe in understanding that there are people, and I've always said this, I would rather coach somebody out of the organization than blindside them. And so I think that goes along with this conversation, which is, now let's be real clear too, again, Chad, like, if the ship is on fire, you talked about the plane, and I talk about this because my buddy took over a church that was on fire. And he said, as the plane was in the air, it's flying, it's on fire, he kept throwing every bit of skill that he knew at it, and nothing was working until he realized, I got to land this plane. We just got to stop for a minute, and we got to put the fires out, and then we're going to rebuild the plane and get it back in the air. Well, he was in a desperate situation that required desperate measures. That is not most of us. Most of us are stepping into something. Yeah, the profit's down, or the attendance is down, or the building needs to be worked on. You got a staff culture that's toxic, whatever the thing may be. Our responsibility most of the time, unless you're in that unique situation, is not to make these instant changes that you might regret down the road. Like, gosh, we so often take the low-hanging fruit, the short-term, win, by giving up the long-term play. And the long-term play is always people. I was talking to a friend, when was it? Yesterday. Yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he's more of a technical guy. He loves to, he's an engineer, kind of wiring. And he goes, man, I love projects. I'm managing projects. I love managing tasks. I don't like managing people because they're complicated. And I'm like, yeah, they are. And if you think there's a cookie cutter way to lead everybody, you're absolutely 100% incorrect. Even as I've been growing my leadership coaching and consulting, I've had a lot of people like, well, tell me your process. And I look at them and go, it's different for every single place I go into. Like, I've got some tools that I like to use. I've got access to different things. But I cannot tell you, when I go to this church, we're going to do these 6 processes. When we go to this church, we're going to do the same 6. That's just not how it works. Like, I have to do an audit and figure out, where is the focus? What are the things we need to work on? Because this process worked for them. I don't know it's going to work for you. Process that works for 50 won't work for 5. Like, there's just some customization to the fact that you got to lead people. And so patience is absolutely required when you're leading people. And even though people are saying you got to come in, you got to make some changes, maybe you do, but be really smart about it. But also stand up for yourself. Stand up to these leaders that are, bossing you around a little bit, even though they are your elders, whatever the thing. You go, hey guys, something you need to know. You asked me to come do this job. Now give me some time and trust me.
Yeah.
And then if we hit that point, and you don't feel like I've done it right, let's recalibrate, and maybe I'm not the right person, but I know that you're the ones that called me to do this. And I would rather, there's an organization I work with that their board kind of understanding is the board's job is to keep their eyes on it, but not their hands. And I love that picture because that's what I would want to look at a board and say when I step into a position like this. Guys, I need your eyes. Girls, I need your eyes on this thing, but not your hands. You
Mhm.
ask me to be the hands. Let me get to work on it. Let my staff get to work on it. And then we will keep you posted on what's going on.
That's really good stuff. I want to go back to what you said a minute ago, which I thought was great in the analogy that you got from your friend that you used in the book about a plane on fire and has to land. You have to
Yeah.
land the plane before you do that. That just really goes well with what you just got done saying too, because it's not a one size fits all. It's like
Yeah.
if you go into a situation where the place is on fire, you're going to handle that a lot differently than a organization that's healthy, and
Yeah.
they're just trying to figure out, hey, how can we bridge the gap between this type of leader and this type of leader? We just need a little bit of help to make this transition. We've got a good culture. He or she is a good leader. We totally wouldn't have hired him if not. How can you help that process? That is going to be completely different than if the place is on fire. And then you
Absolutely.
start building from scratch. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate the authenticity of which you said that, because it isn't just this kind of business centric, just kind of like, I'm going to stamp these 5 things and this is what we're going to do all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And because all of life is nuanced. The more the
Totally.
older I get, the wiser that I think I become. I don't know. We could
Are you a wise guy? Is that what you're saying?
maybe. My wife's not here, so she's not going to
Yeah.
be able to give voice to this. But I think the more that you kind of lean into leadership and the more mature we get, the more that black and white thinking fades away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just, you got to realize these are people, and
Yeah.
people are complicated. And that's part of why, like, I really like that terminology of the dance of discernment. Is there are certain groups that, out of that epic process that I talk about in the book, which is a process, it's simple, but it's wide enough for you to realize, like, I need to do this much of that, but not all of that. Or I need, like,
Mhm.
but a big part of that is recognizing some organizations need a ton of evaluation,
Mhm.
and then, move on from there. Some of them already know exactly what the problems are.
Mhm.
So we've got a good gauge on where we got to fix, where the instruments are telling us need to be adjusted. Now we really have to work hard at implementation, or this group has not been cared for in years.
Mhm.
What do we do to care for them? Like, we can evaluate all day long. We can be patient. We can absolutely implement new culture and vision. But really they have a lot of that. Maybe they just need to be loved on and cared for. And let's
Mhm.
get the best out of them, because all of a sudden they realize we actually care about you.
Yeah. And the best for the organization is the best for the individual. And
Sure.
sometimes the best for the individual is coaching them up in the organization. And sometimes it's coaching them out of the
Yep.
organization.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's that dance of discernment to know what to do and how to do it in that time frame.
Right.
Well, Tyler, we're about to wrap up our conversation for today, but how can people get connected with you? What else are you doing other than writing? And I know you have another book in the works. I'm just teasing
Well
you on that.
played.
But
Well played.
yeah. So how can people connect with you? And maybe for a leader out there who wants to have you join in and help them in their
Yeah.
transition, perhaps, how can they
Yeah.
connect?
It's interesting, Chad. I've been doing a lot of research with this book, thinking about, there's some succession and transition coaching out there, but there's not a ton. And most of it is built around the front end of that, helping somebody do succession and then get the person in place.
Mm-hmm.
There's just very little, with the exception of a friend of mine, Sean Morgan, who really loved the part of, once you're in place, walking with a leader, walking with a pastor. Imagine when you stepped in, that they said, hey, one of the things we do is we give you 6 months of an executive leadership coach, specifically around the transition process
Mm-hmm.
and what to be looking for and how to be thinking. So, with my company, the Life Giving Company, when I left Catalyst a couple of years ago, I was just like, I'm a one-man shop. Let's just do this. I'll do coaching. And honestly, it's grown so much that I've got other people now that are kind of joining into the coaching process with me, to be able to reach more leaders and serve more kingdom leaders. So I do a lot of leadership. We do a lot of leadership and executive coaching. We do culture audits to figure out how you're doing really, and how can we focus some attention and get your team better, your church better. But you can go to lifegiving.co for that. And then the easiest way just to keep up with me is just at Tyler Reagin, Reagin, on social media.
Cool. And then the 1010 project, I know that
Yeah.
that is something you're up to as well. outside of
Yeah.
the Life Giving Co. So what are you doing with that nonprofit?
Yeah, gosh, we could have done the whole thing on that. But, I mentioned earlier losing some of our friends. A year ago this month, I was with a friend who had been a pastor for a long time, and he is pastoring pastors, and then had pretty incredible time with him and a couple other guys in Colorado. And then 4 weeks later, he took his life. And
Wow.
that was the third pastor friend in 12 months that had committed suicide. And
Man,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
remember I just remember thinking, like, what was so bad? Like, what was the secret? What was the thing that was driving you to that ultimate decision?
Mm.
And one of the things we realized is the more successful you are in ministry, the more isolated you become. Like, if guys like this who have great relationships, but yet still have secrets that they can't tell, how about guys that don't have great relationships, or who
Mm-hmm.
realize that I've got inappropriate feelings, but I can't tell anybody. I definitely can't tell my elders because I'm scared to death they'll fire me. I can't go ask, excuse me, for $5,000 to go to counseling because they're going to freak out. I don't know how to talk to my wife or family about it. My friends are now on payroll at the church, so that's dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like what do I do? And so we've created this, it's called 1010 Project, based on Ecclesiastes 10:10, that says, when the axe grows dull, it's harder to swing, but with skill comes success.
Mm.
We want to put lead and senior level leaders in the faith-based space. I think we're going to do some Christian leaders, business leaders as well, and women as we continue to build this out. But they're in community for 12 months. We take them on an excursion. They get to know, they've got a group leader. They're in a small group with 4, 5, 6 other people who are absolutely understanding of their roles because they're in them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in their world. You know what I mean? And they can be safe to say some of the things they need to say. Then we do monthly coaching together. So we'll all get on Zoom. And last month we had Mark Batterson with our first group, and we've got Henry Cloud's going to do some with us, and just some leadership training that matters. Then every month they break up for an hour with their guys and go, how we doing for real? Like, and this is a no BS zone. Like, you've got to be honest, because it's not going to value in you if you're not honest about what's going on, but they have to know it's safe, or why would I say it? So I think one of the big keys for me is the 12-month piece, but also at month 6, we take them through Onsite, which is a therapeutic retreat center. And so these guys will go with their group of guys through a 4-day counseling retreat where they really learn about the mental and emotional health aspects of what they're doing and what's happened in their life. Do a few more months of coaching and then wrap up with another fly fishing trip, or, just fun excursion getting together. So the heartbeat is, at the end of 12 months, pastors will have a group of guys in their corner that know everything, and that they learn some tools along the way to hopefully be able to manage some of the difficulties of being a pastor. And so I love it. We're excited about it. We've got we're filling up our second group with pastors right now. It's not cheap because it's a lot. We're giving you a whole lot.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we're just trying to prevent the collateral damage when a pastor falls, because it's, yes, their family impacted, and that's terrible, but so is the faith family they've been leading.
Mm-hmm.
And so just trying to go, guys, this is preventative in nature. We're not trying to get guys off the rails, which, if that's the case, we deal with that. We're trying to go, you need to be able to stay into the game. So thanks for asking about that. But yeah, it's called 1010 Project. The number 10, the word 10 project.com is where you can find out more about that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that work. It's such, everybody's seen, if you pay any attention to the media or how involved you are in the faith-based space, everybody knows of the ills of clergy and people within ministry, and the moral failures and not knowing what to do, and the dynamic. And I'm sorry to hear about your 3 friends. That is I've had some very close family who took their own life. I understand the pain behind that. So I want to say thanks for that work. And also just the book was great, but just thank you especially for that work with pastors, because you literally could have a lot bigger of an impact than I think what you even believe or even could fathom. So
yeah. Thanks for saying that.
So I appreciate that. Well, Tyler, it's been great having you on the show today and talking about your book, kicking it a little bit. And thanks for carving the time for us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.